Today, we're having a chat with Amina Sayed regarding our important topic of wills and how they relate to property transactions. Amina, thank you so much for your time and your expertise today in covering the important topic. I unfortunately am dealing currently with one of my sellers that has unfortunately passed away mid-transaction. And it just highlighted the importance of having a will and the kind of system or the procedures that follow subsequently, and how it affects a potential purchaser that's put an offer to purchase on a home that unfortunately has a seller that's passed, and how it affects the surviving spouse and what sort of procedures needs to be put in place and the implications. So I thought Amina would be the right person to discuss this important topic with us.
Thank you so much, Tanya. It's always such a pleasure chatting to you. 100%, I agree. Having a will in place is so important. In South Africa specifically, having a valid will allows you not just to financially plan, but also plan for your family, to also guard your assets and also to manage risk effectively. And these are things that I'm sure that you see on a day-to-day where families come to you and they're in quite a bind because they don't know what needs to happen now that a loved one has passed away.
So in terms of the procedure, so unfortunately we have a death. What is the next step that would need to happen in terms of the surviving spouse?
So with regards to a death, if there is no will in place, then the death itself is dealt with according to the Interstate Succession Act. And that is in terms of how succession would occur when there is no will in place to dictate who will inherit from the estate. And what needs to happen there is that the death needs to be reported to the master. And if there is no will, then the laws of interstate succession take place. And that specifically states who will inherit from your estate without you having the ability to choose who you wish to inherit from that estate, or better yet, who you would like to manage your estate after you have passed away. Now, having a will, Tanya, really places that into focus, because not only can you dictate who will inherit. For instance, if you really don't like Auntie Margaret, we can unfortunately or fortunately keep her out of the will. Or alternatively, when there is a will in place, we can also determine who the executor of that will is going to be. And we often want that executor to be someone who is responsible, someone who has a backbone, someone that's going to stand up to the family politics, the procedural difficulties that you will find with the master's office or things like that. Someone that's really going to take your wishes right up until the end, so to say, and also do what is best for your estate and the people that you leave behind, because that is why we ultimately want to plan in a will, to take care of the loved ones that we leave behind.
Amina, in terms of a transaction, so let's say we are mid-transaction, we've now reported the matter to the master, the surviving spouse is now appointed as the executor. Does the transaction then just fall, in terms of the conveyancing process, it just follows the normal process, or is there any delays based on that?
So as much as we would love for the process to be as streamlined as, just continuing after death has occurred, unfortunately, due to our laws in South Africa, there are specific procedures that need to be put into place. So while the sale itself will remain valid, because that is a binding contract between the seller and the purchaser, which has also been overseen by yourself, for instance, it is then the transfer of the property that comes into question, because who exactly will be ratifying that transfer if the individual who has ratified the sale has passed away? So what needs to now happen is that the estate needs to be reported to the master. An executor needs to be put into place. Hopefully you do have a will, and that executor then is the spouse or whoever else, and they need to ratify that decision and assist with that transfer going forward. So your executor will not only act on their behalf if they are the spouse that is involved in selling, but also act on your behalf and make decisions and ratify decisions that are in the best interest of the estate itself.
Amina, I wanted to kind of run a case study by you. Let's use hypothetically that we have a seller that passes away, doesn't have a will. How would that implicate the transaction for our purchaser? And what should the seller have done? And just to make you think a little bit more, what makes a will valid?
Okay.
So just if you can cover those little topics for us.
Alrighty, so let's first start about what makes a will valid.
Perfect.
So with that, we need a written will. We need a testator, so the person that's actually going to be signing the will to have capacity. We need 2 competent witnesses. We need the signature of the testator as well. And the will needs to be voluntary. So if we have those components baseline and there are no other exceptions or exceptional circumstances, a will be valid. So Tanya, let's start off first with what actually makes a valid will. We have 5 baseline requirements. The first would be that the testator, so the person actually signing the will, has capacity, meaning that they are mentally okay to sign a will and they are over 16 years old. Okay. The second thing that we need to have is that your will needs to be written. The third thing that we need to have is that there needs to be the signature of the testator on each page and at the bottom of your will as well. The third thing is that there needs to be 2 competent witnesses, and unfortunately, sorry.
No.
Now let's move into if we don't have a valid will and what happens to a buyer in that instance. So there isn't a direct implication on a buyer with relation to them purchasing a property, but there are numerous indirect consequences that can affect them. One of them being that the transfer itself will be delayed. Number 2 is that the buyer may start getting a little bit antsy of what's happening with the property. And sometimes, as you know, Tanya, that could start putting a buyer off. Purchasing a property is such a big decision. It sometimes takes people quite a long time to do and to make that decision, to commit. And if these kinds of things start happening in between, if you are very pessimistic, you could see it as a sign to move on and start looking for something else. So the last thing that you want to happen is that your buyer is actually put off from the entire process just because of procedures that need to happen with your seller. And your seller could have protected themselves by drafting a valid will in the first place and their loved ones.
The 2 things that we guaranteed in life is death and taxes. So let's make sure that we get ourselves organized and maybe have a chat with Amina and get your affairs in order.
100%. Thank you so much for your time, Tanya.
Thank you. Thanks, guys.